Good afternoon, everybody. This is your host, Pramod Solanki. Since some 75 people had registered, I thought we will allow a few minutes, but I think we'll get started. Our guest is here, and so are so many of you, and others would come along. Can I request Dr. Misra and actually even others as well to switch on their videos? You feel free to switch on your videos and you can watch the interaction. Only audio we will open at an appropriate time. So, well, a warm welcome to this second session of leadership series. We began this last month. This is a second session in the series, and we hope to bring one to you every month. Leadership, I guess it goes without saying that it's possibly one of the most important aspects for success of any enterprise. And we learn about it from books, from researchers. And I think we learn as much about it from people who have been there, done that, and have distinguished themselves in the role of leadership in their leadership journeys. And that's the attempt, this third, if not the last, certainly, source of learning and raising the bar on leadership. That's the effort, of this leadership series. I've been singularly fortunate to have some people who really clearly stand out in terms of their chosen domains, and that's how this series gets supported. And actually, for the first one, as some of you would know, we had Professor Pradeep Khandwala, former director of IIM Ahmedabad, sharing his leadership journey. And now for the second one, we have someone who I can easily say is a pride of HR fraternity in India for the kind of work he has done in the organization, the kind of heights he has scaled is something that makes HR people proud, and they kind of looking at him, they look up to what is possible through HR journey. I'm talking of Dr. Santrupt Misra, who actually for a corporate gathering in India doesn't really require an introduction. But it's my privilege as a host, Dr. Misra, to go through this customary process of introduction. A very warm welcome to you to this second session.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having consented to be a part of this session. In a nutshell, for some of you who may not know some aspects of Dr. Misra's leadership journey, he is currently the Group Director, Birla Carbon Business, Director for Chemicals Business, Director for Group Human Resources for the Aditya Birla Group, which is, $48 billion global conglomerate today. He's a business leader and HR professional standing with over 3 decades of experience in global business leadership, corporate governance, organizational transformation, non-profit leadership, and professional development. Santrupt has worked at board level for over 2 decades now as non-executive director and executive director in publicly listed companies, unlisted companies, and not-for-profit organizations, both in India and overseas. He's a director in several companies of Aditya Birla Group, including Aditya Birla Capital, Grasim, and Birla Carbon Thailand, which are listed companies. He was an independent director on the board of Oil and Natural Gas Commission, a leading government of India enterprise, and the chairperson of the board of governors of the National Institute of Technology, Rourkela. Dr. Misra has been recently appointed as the chairman of the Project Advisory Committee for the Ekmara Kshetra scheme and Orissa state government's project of immense significance for the heritage of Odisha and of cultural significance for the country. He's also on governing bodies of professional organizations, associations such as Association of Executive Research Consultant USA, also on the board of Javier's Institute of Management. He was also on the board of Javier Institute of Management, Bhubaneswar, and the Worldwide ERC USA. He also served as a member of the SHRM Certification Commission USA. Under his leadership, Birla Carbon has emerged as a global leader in the carbon black space for its beginnings as a regionally focused carbon black player. He has been instrumental in developing a strong employer brand for Aditya Birla Group, which was named the best employer in India, great place for leaders to work, and top company for leaders by Aon Hewitt, Fortune magazine, and RBL Group, respectively. Dr. Misra holds 2 postgraduate degrees in political science and in personal management, from the first from Utkal University and second from Tata Institute of Social Sciences. In addition, he also holds 2 PhDs from India and UK in public administration and industrial relations, respectively, and an honorary DSc from Aston University, UK. He is a fellow of National Academy of Human Resources, USA, honorary fellow of Coaching Federation of India, and an Eisenhower fellow, an Aston Business School fellow, and All India Management Association fellow, and a Commonwealth scholar. So that in a nutshell is about Dr. Santrupt Misra. And if I may add my own bit with your permission, Dr. Misra, in India, when a cricketer begins his career, he aspires to be a Sachin Tendulkar. When an actor begins his career, he aspires to be an Amitabh Bachchan. And I think when an HR professional begins his career, he aspires to be another Dr. Santrupt Misra. So with that brief about him, if it was virtual, we would have liked to welcome him with a thunderous applause. But in this virtual world, with a very warm welcome to you, Dr. Misra, once again.
Thank you so much.
Before I begin with questions, let me tell you this: the group, as I see here, looks more like old friends. You have old friends, mentors, and teachers. You have Professor T.V. Rao. You have Mrs. Satish Pradhan there. Some Twitter friends, Mr. Ross Swan from other parts of the world. More than 10 HR heads, if I may say, and many senior folks, present here. So I think that's a kind of interest in listening to Dr. Santrupt Misra's, leadership journey. Before I start with the questions, Dr. Misra, any comments from your side?
No, nothing. First of all, thank you for having me on your chat show or talk show. I don't know what you call it. It's good to be engaging with family and friends, as I call it, because most of the people here are my family friends or long friends or people who have great admiration and respect for. So it's sometimes very frightening and humbling to try and share your story with them. I will try and do my best, and I hope that we can have a good conversation around whatever interests them and interests you. So over to you. And you talked about people wanting to be Sachin Tendulkar or Amitabh Bachchan. I must in a lighter vein say that it depends on which generation you were born, because in every generation the icons change and people want to be someone different. And if at all any new young HR person is wanting to become somebody, I think keeping me as the target would be limiting their standards. They should aspire for something much more, really. And I'm sure that all of us, whatever we did in our lives, in a different context, different times, perhaps we all could have done much more. And therefore, I would always urge young people to aspire for a lot more because they have the opportunity, they have the platform, they have the technology, the resources, the exposure, much more than what many of my colleagues on this call had, or even I personally had.
Sure. I agree there. It's more of a symbolism. So that I think that stands. So it's nice to see. I see Akhil there and so many of your friends there. It's like it's like a group of friends chatting together. I look forward to an interesting conversation. I have some questions, but at time permitting, we will have questions from so many of your friends who are here.
Sure.
So, Dr. Misra, the first question I want to ask you is that many of us, of course, you have some of your contemporaries here, they would have seen you from early days, so maybe they would know more. But the first thing I want to know more about you as a person. A teenager, Santrupt Misra, school-going, college-going Santrupt Misra, and the Dr. Santrupt Misra whom we know today. Share your reflections as a person, in the basic form, the way the world view, the way you view things around. How much, share with us this evolution, if it was gradual or if there were inflection points and transformation points. Share with us, how the teenager Santrupt has transformed into a astute corporate leader called Dr. Santrupt Misra we know today.
Well, I think when you talk about teenagers, Santrupt Misra, images flash in my mind of pictures that I have of my younger days, which was skinny, bony, full of flair, fun, friends. So the full of flair, fun, and friends have remained with me, but the skinny, bony, and full of hair have gone. So, that's pretty transformative, I must say.
Yeah.
But yeah, inflection points have been many. As I grew up, my ancestral family in many ways were connected with the freedom movement or political movement in many ways. So I grew up listening to stories from my dad of freedom struggle and the family's association with it. My father's own childhood of running along farmland to attend to school, which was 8-9 kilometers away, with sometimes being chased by snakes. So, early image you form in your mind is that is what school is, life is, and that is how you grow up. I didn't have any formal education for first several years of my life, because my dad was posted in very strange places. So I think the source of information and exposure was around family, around extended family and family friends, teachers. And being the son of an academic, I had access to libraries always. And that always created a great source of information for me in those days. And grew up with a fair amount of reading Indian mythology and a lot of stories. I remember there was a tremendous author in India who wrote a lot of stories, and it was called Lokagulp Sanchayan. And it was a fat book of almost 800 short stories, if I remember. And I perhaps would have gone through that a couple of times, that book. There were favorite stories, nice stories, mythologies, etc. So the worldview at that time seemed to be very clear, that the world was consisting of a lot of principles, because right and wrong was something that was given very early in life, what you need to do, shouldn't do, etc. Maybe there was perhaps a moral overdose, so that, you kind of lost the sense of objectivity for a certain time, being prisoners of the moral overdose that you had. But then sometimes later in life, I learned to sort out through those. And also the symbols of achievement and prosperity remained confined to anybody who had a Sarkari Jeep or had a telephone PNT line, they could speak, those were luxuries that I didn't have until I saw my dad becoming principal of a college where he had a telephone. He didn't have a Jeep still. And therefore, government, and whenever you met people, there was no industry in Odisha, not of significance, not where my father was posted or where I grew up. Therefore, meeting a few government officers, the commercial tax officer, the deputy superintendent of police, or people of the tehsildar and people of that kind represented the elite of society. And if there is a local circus came, they were invited to occupy the front row, and we were invited along with them. So you thought, that's what life is, and that's where the accomplishment is. That's where achievement standard is. So government was the ultimate standard of achievement and aspiration at that point in time. And that remained so for a long time. And Odisha, being an industrially backward state, continued to remain where people were very accomplished academically and went and did a lot of civil services, Even today they do that. And therefore that was the great career opportunity. The next perhaps were people like doctors. My maternal grandfather was a doctor, so you saw that. You saw bank officers. So the success images were very limited at that point in time. And obviously, a lot of that underwent a change as I first time came to Bombay to the Tata Institute of Social Sciences to study, and Bombay was a big city. I was a small town guy, trying to understand this city, navigate, and take a local train and go to industries and do the field work in MNCs or large Indian corporations. Opened up your eye as to what could different standards be, what could our professions be, what could backgrounds be. In between, of course, when I went for a short period to JNU, I think that also opened up another perspective of a heady cocktail of education and politics, and ideology and pragmatism. You found people coming from very rich landlord families talking about left-wing ideology. And those contradictions were more visible as your horizons expanded, you got exposure. So I think to summarize, life from limited opportunities to life being an opportunity unlimited was a kind of transformation that happened with ideological, moral teachings of a certain kind, that there could be many shades of views and opinions and perspectives. That opened up. Going again to England to do my second PhD, perhaps much before globalization became fashionable in India, or working for MNCs became fashionable, broadened my global outlook, learning, teaching there, being with people from, on my PhD floor, there were people from 7, 8 nationalities with me, and therefore multicultural environment. I grew up naturally with them for 3 years, morning, noon, and night, you interact with them. So I think on the whole, skills, awareness, perspectives, way of looking at life, lifestyle, culture, personal preferences, the way you related to people, all of that underwent a change from teenager me to today. From a human resources professional, when you started leading businesses, that underwent another set of perspective changes, because sometimes the business realities are more hard-nosed than the romantic, idyllic happiness that HR sometimes provides you. So, you move away from there.
Sure. Interesting. And we'll be talking more about that transition in any case from HR to business. Quickly, after your, if I may share, gold medal at Tata Institute of Social Sciences, you joined their faculty for a short while, then you went on to do PhD and came back and there again as a faculty in the senior grade, but eventually you made a shift to the corporate career. Any thoughts there?
Well, I think a lot of the things that have happened in my life were not planned, really. They just happened. I enjoyed the very fact that things happened to me, and I think when you plan too much, if they don't happen, you feel bad. When you plan too much and they happen, you think that you are the architect of your destiny. So when things happen to you, when you have not planned for them exactly with precision about it, then life changes slightly differently. So Tata Institute, I came to teach mostly to do my first PhD, because when I took my first corporate job with Singhanias and JKs, those were not the internet age. There was no library there, and I wanted to do a PhD. I registered for one. And as Professor T.V. Rao here, Akhil and others who have done a PhD would tell you that you need to have access to some literature and library. And in the absence of an internet age, you had to really reach the physical book to read it, or a journal or whatever. I think the microfilming of documents, etc., is something. The first time I saw digital form of knowledge storage in Aston University when I went to England, and I had some limited access to it. So I wanted to do a PhD, and that's how I first came to Tata Institute to teach, because there was a library there, and obviously I went through some interesting questions from my director then, Dr. Armaiti Desai, because I had just about a year ago passed out, and I was very active in the Students' Union, agitating on various issues. She very sweetly, as she does, asked me in the interview, well, Santrupt, you were agitating on the other side on this and that subject. How would you handle on this side? I said, well, as long as I'm objective, I have nothing to worry about. I can handle all this subject. So anyway, they were very kind to select me. So that's when I did the PhD, first one I completed, and I was teaching. And Actually, I started enjoying my teaching career and research and all of that. And I got the scholarship to go to England to do a second PhD. I wanted to do a short-term kind of specialization, but they offered me, looking at my background, a full scholarship to do a second PhD, and Tata Institute offered me leave with pay. So I said, what's my problem? That was the richest ever I was in my life, honestly speaking, a scholarship there and a salary here. At that time, Tata Institute had advertised and had promoted me as a reader. Most people become a reader in 8 to 10 years' time. I barely had 3 years of experience when I got promoted as a reader. Yes. Maybe a lot of people believed in perhaps merit, and wrongly perhaps saw merit in me. But what happened was, then a colleague of mine was very senior to me. He is no more, and I pray for him. And he felt aggrieved that perhaps he should have got the position, and he filed a court case that time in High Court against the institute. And obviously, you can't file a case against the institute without making me a party. And that's the first time I thought that maybe I should move out of academics. Why should I fight a court case for, there's nothing much there except a recognition that I became a reader first. But anyway, that story remained in the cold storage as I went to England, and I was doing my second PhD. I finished my second PhD, came back, and bumped into a friend of mine who I knew, who happened to be going with Hindustan Lever to 4 Acres, their training center. Gentleman called Aizaz Beg, I presume if he's there on the line, you'd be listening. He's in Saudi Arabia nowadays. I met him a few years ago in Saudi Arabia. We bumped into each other at Churchgate Station, and that's when he said, when did you come back? I said, I came back a few months ago and, weeks ago. So he said, what are you doing? I said, well, I've joined back Tata Institute, but I've not decided what I want to do. So then he invited me to have lunch at Lever House the next day. And I used to live in the lane behind the Lever House. So I just walked across and I had lunch with him. At the end of lunch, he said, my director of personnel, so-and-so wants to meet you. And I said, well, I came in a half-sleeve shirt to meet you. Who's your director of personnel? I have no idea. He said, no, he's an informal guy. Come and meet him. So I went and met him. So they had a role in that training manager role, and something mixed with that. And so he said, your profile is of interest. If this job interests you, you have to meet my panel. So I met some, and I was actually going back to my homestead, Odisha. So I said, well, if you give me an airfare, I'll come back to attend an interview. Otherwise, you have to wait for 3-4 weeks until I come back from Odisha. In those days, by the way, airfare was a very luxurious thing. Not many people offered. Honestly, today's people who listen to it will laugh, saying, what does he talk about airfare? But in those days, it was very rare. And so anyway, I came back and, attended this very significant, seriously looking bunch of gentlemen, no women in those days, Satish in those days used to be in Brookfields in Brookbond, And so I attended, and they offered me this job. And those days, Infosys was not born, or and many companies of the kind that we talk about didn't exist. So people used to give an arm and leg to join Hindustan Lever, Brookbond. And I recall that I walked away from Brookbond interview in Tata Institute because I didn't want to be a management trainee in those days. That's a different chapter. I had fancy ideas in my mind. And so people need to give an arm and leg to join the company. Here I thought, here's a job they're offering, and let me go and explore. So that's how it came. So it was not a very well thought through plan, strategic 5-year plan of my career or anything of that kind. It just happened. So.
Oh, interesting. Very interesting. So, this Hindustan Unilever job, I hope it will be correct to say that it was a mid-level position. Is that correct to say?
Absolutely. Even below mid-level doesn't matter. It's an accurate description. Satish may correct me. It was called Job Band 2. And Satish was in some celebrated brand. I forget it. Some Job Band 26 or something that time. Satish, I can't, or whatever. Job Class 26 or something it used to be called. And Akhil also would remember some job class of Unilever in those days. Yeah.
Unless Mr. Satish wants to say something.
No. I think Dr. Misra in his was the most significant human resource development job, perhaps in the country. Forget the grade and all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, that's sure. It's nice of you to hear. So now, so in that role, obviously, you did certain important things, and for a Aditya Birla group to pick you up for the leadership role of HR means that you, in that role, you kind of made your mark. There are people here who would be interested to know. Tell us something about it, and what kind of helped in the further journey.
Well, I don't know, Hindustan Lever had its own way of tracking talent and assessing talent, but perhaps I wasn't there long enough to be classified or kind of rejected from that list, I would say. But in my short stint, perhaps I made some difference, but whether that was high potential or, path breaking or earth shattering, I do not know. But I thought that, there was something that could be changed, which I attempted to change, and some I succeeded. I remember I got some 20-25% increase in my budget. Hindustan Lever in those days used to make a presentation to the entire board of directors to get your budget. And Mr. S.M. Datta was chairman. And I got some 20-25% increase in my budget, which a lot of people told me was very credible for a newcomer to get such a budget increase. So maybe that was my claim to fame, part of it. And a couple of times there were certain things where I thought there were failings, and I displayed my courage of conviction to try and fix some of those. I recall an occasion when a very senior director, without taking names, called a manager back in the middle of a course from the training center. And I was told, he told me, the manager concerned, that I have to go tomorrow to the head office to meet so-and-so. And I honestly remember I felt very upset. I said, "What's this? This is not very professional, And I fixed an appointment with that director concerned. And in the afternoon, I drove to the headquarters where my office was actually, though I used to spend a lot of time at the training center. And I walked into the gentleman's office and I told him, "I need your help." So he said, "What help do you need?" I said, "I believe you have called a manager back from the course." And so the director said, "Do you think if it was not important, I will call him back?" I said, "Well, if every director says that, how do I run a program? Because, how am I to judge whether it is important or not important? But, you all as board of directors expect that learning and training is important. And I need to you got to give me the support to make that happen." And I know a couple of other senior colleagues talked about it later to me. And I believe that made a difference. This display of remarkably stupid amount of courage being a newcomer early in your career. It was a career limiting exercise, I'm sure. But I survived perhaps that. And similarly, there were a few occasions where I stood up for my conviction, whether it was right or wrong. I think some of them, I know that when I was leaving Hindustan Lever, a couple of very senior directors told me I had done a good job and why was I leaving. That was very gratifying to hear from them. So I believe, but basically, I think Mr. Birla was a very new chairman. 6 months before he met me, he had taken over. And I'm sure he was looking for somebody to work with him in alignment. And I later on got to know that perhaps his first preference was somebody else compared to me, who didn't join him because he was perhaps looking for something else. And Mr. Birla decided, in the absence of anything, to take a bet on me. And at a National HRE Network award, when National HRE Network was very kind to confer an award on Mr. Birla as very HR-friendly CEO. And I remember he went on stage and said that as a young chairman with a young HR head, we thought together we'll make a hash of everything. And we did not. So, and so that's been the journey, really. I don't think I was prepared for the job that I was taking in Aditya Birla Group. But equally, I don't think Aditya Birla Group was prepared to experiment with a lot of HR innovations or experiments at that point in time either. T.V. Rao here, Professor T.V. Rao has been a partner in my early stages of doing several things in the group. We relied on range of expertise and experiences and resources to bring about changes. So I don't think 1996, when I look back, we exactly knew what we wanted to do, but we knew that there was a huge platform and an opportunity, and there was hidden potential and things could be done. And I think now, looking back, time proves that, yes, some things could have been done and we did some of it.
Sure. Quite a lot, of course, I'm sure. At any point of time, if any one of you want to share your observation, please put it on the chat and I'll make sure we take those up. But Dr. Misra, your journey with Aditya Birla Group, it's been one of the most outstanding stories, quickly moving on to head the function as a president and in the board, then going on to lead some of their biggest business verticals. There are many, while when we began, we only had most of your friends, I believe, but I see relatively younger lot has joined in the meantime. We have Mr. Rambian Rao from L&T, Dr. Henjit, and some of the younger colleagues. So it will be interesting to know, this journey at Aditya Birla Group. Tell us some of the things that helped you contribute to the group, and that, of course, helped in the growth that you have had there.
First of all, Pramod, I must say, Visti, Satish, Akil, and few of them, my friends there, would have taken serious offense that you not considering them to be young.
Akil for sure, because I engage with him on Twitter and he's very young. That much I know. Others I don't know about it.
So, well, Aditya Birla Group, what we did was, again, not a very grand design of transformation.
Okay.
We just, what we did was to sense where were the challenges and where were the opportunities, and prioritize those and kind of make an attempt. I won't say kind of with a well thought through design to go and change it, make an attempt to somewhat improve the situation, make it more contemporary, and but in doing so, I think the idea of a virtuous cycle emerged there, because at every little thing that you did, it created a positive impact. It created more openness to change, more openness to accept. And the more openness to change and accept came, then you went and made a bigger change, an even bigger change, and they created some positive outcome and impact, and that created more virtuous kind of sentiment. And I think it's a classic case of the cycle of virtuosity, where the right things lead to right outcome, and right outcomes again lead to right things, and it goes on. And I think that's how it happened. We kind of were cautious. We were respectful to the legacy, to the history, to people, to their achievements. We were not cowboys in terms of trying to change. When I say we, it includes my chairman, Mr. Kumar Mangalam Birla, myself, and several of colleagues. I think one of the things we learned that, you need to bring empathy and appreciation about perspective of a lot of people who, for whatever reason, they were products of their time and did things in a certain way. And if you want to change things, you cannot dump in the dustbin of history what they have done. Rather, find an interesting way to respect that and carry them along to make other changes. And that's what we successfully managed to achieve, actually. And I think some of the lessons personally for me in that journey were that, number one, I realized that you got to be in love with the company that you work for. You got to be in love with the role and job that you are doing to be able to make a significant contribution. But usually love is blind, but you cannot be blind in that love. You need to notice where the organization is doing right, where it is not doing right, where you are doing right and you are not doing right. And you got to be very self-aware to know where things going wrong. For example, I remember a very senior director in Aditya Birla Group, and he was really respected and extremely senior. He's no more, and I think he was an outstanding man. He walked to my office a few times. And one day I found a note slipped under my door which said, you haven't achieved as much as he has that you expect him to come to your office. Now, that was not my intent. And he, despite me having privately told him several times, he just made a decision to walk to my office. And I had to finally go and tell him that, look, Miss So-and-so, whenever you need anything, call me on the intercom. We'll discuss, or I will come to your office whenever you give me a time, but please don't walk to my office, because it makes people feel as if I'm expecting you to come to my office. That's, you know that I've remembered my father being a professor, being brought up in a family of accomplished people. Respect was a very, drilled in value. So, you don't inherently never disrespected anyone, subtly, not deliberately, So I had to make my position explicitly very clear with this individual. So I realized that good intentions alone are not enough. People must be able to see it as a good intention. You must be able to even if you receive a feedback that is negative and perhaps wrong, it's factually wrong, but still you have a duty to respond to it, So therefore, you got to be in love with your company, with your job, but you can't be blind in the process of love. You got to notice these aberrations and, take steps to do that. The second is that leadership is all about, courage of conviction. You must go with a conviction. You can go wrong, and then you got to step back. But you need some amount of conviction, a deep sense of faith that this is what is needed. This is what is ailing it, or this is what needs to be done. And you got to go with that gut sometimes. You do not have data analysis. We never used to have those data analytics in those days, like we talk about it today. And a lot of the time you pick up some signals and symbols and, patterns, and you go with your gut about what you need to do. And the last thing I would say is that having come from Hindustan Lever, one of the clear things I had told myself that this is not Hindustan Lever, and I'm not going to try and make this Hindustan Lever. That would be very wrong, because this organization has been around 125 years at that point in time when I joined, had its own legacy. It has great founders like late Mr. Ghanshyam Das Birla and late Aditya Birla, who took the company global. And they did something outstanding that many people couldn't do. And therefore, they have a right to have their own signature tune, their own signature experience. And you don't try to make that organization something else, what it is not or doesn't want to be. So I think trying to discover what were the latent strengths of the organization, the capabilities, people's emotional connects and points, and how to leverage and use that was a great learning I had. For example, when I joined, Mr. Aditya Birla had passed away about 6, 7 months, 8 months before. All the senior people I'll talk to, after 3, 4, 5 sentences about late Mr. Aditya Birla, they'll start breaking down. I realized that this man had such a tremendous personal equity and connect with people in remote factories. They will narrate stories about on his visit, what he told them, what he told his children, what he did. Now, I had never had the occasion and privilege of meeting late Mr. Aditya Birla, but I felt as if I knew the man by virtue of the way people were narrating about him and their experiences and the emotional connect he had created, that people could cry 8 months down the line for the promoter chairman, who was no more, and there was nobody from the family and others to watch you doing that. I felt that was a tremendous emotive force that was there in the organization. That gave me the idea of saying, okay, let's establish Aditya Birla Awards for Outstanding Achievement as an internal competition to recognize excellence, because this emotive connect needs to be leveraged to, keep his memory alive, his story of excellence alive, and keep these people connected to that. And I think that turned out to be our internal Oscars. And for year after year, it created a very different leverage within the organization that I would have normally expected. So I think it was a journey truly, Mahatma Gandhi wrote about my experiments with truth, Nehru wrote about discovery of India. I think in Aditya Birla Group, what we did was a combination of discovery and experiments of its own kind in that context.
This is remarkable. This is truly remarkable. So, connecting with the DNA of the organization and leveraging it rather than trying to roughshod trying to ride roughshod is one distinct lesson that I see in the way you went about doing things there. Remarkable, really. Now, from another important, I think one of the first, but most certainly for the Indian conglomerates, from HR leadership to the business leadership, is something that many HR people today aspire for. That's something, while I see a few questions here and there coming up, I will take that. But tell us how this transition happened, and how much of HR experience actually got leveraged for the business leadership.
Well, I think first of all, I would say a lot of HR learnings and experience got leveraged. And I believe when I got the business role, I realized that I had never sold a paper pin or an alpin or a hair pin or any kind of pin, and to suddenly run a business that was already in Thailand, that was already in Egypt, that was already in China and India. I realized that instead of trying to pretend to be an expert in marketing and finance and sales and manufacturing, the best is to stick to your core competence, what you know, not do an overdose of that, not look at everything from that lens, but that is your strength, recognize and use it. Mm-hmm. So that's something, I told myself very, very clearly, and that helped me. But the way it basically happened was, earlier I had looked at, I had responsibility for group's IT function for 5 years almost. And I had already been in a couple of boards, including Indal when we acquired as a listed board. So I was getting a lot of close view of business from an apex decision-making point of view. I was already present in many business reviews, strategy meetings, this, that, and all. And that had opened up my mind as well, usually about the trade-offs that they were making or the decisions they were making or the challenges that were there. And I realized that the liberal arts education, combination that I had in college of philosophy, history, economics, and political science, I think the combination of liberal social science and art background, but has made your mind more spongy about receiving, things that you do not know and seeing a little bit of interconnectedness. Because if you look at political history of any country or India, it's bit of politics, bit of history. If you read political history of any country, it's bit of political economy and politics. And history is connected with politics. So I think I suddenly have realized over a period of time that social sciences create the ability in you to see these interlinkages between unconnected phenomena. And business is all about that, A war happens in China, a container shortage happens somewhere, and how does it impact you? You need to be just able to extrapolate phenomena happening which seemingly are unconnected. So, some amount of how should I say, quite passive preparation mentally had happened. And honestly speaking, Mr. Birla, my chairman, being an entrepreneur at heart, he always has believed in fungibility of leadership. He's not focused on domain expertise, and I think a lot of the time I think John Scully or whoever's book From Pepsi to Apple, etc., we refer to. But there are many Pepsi to Apple that have happened in the Aditya Birla group. Nobody talks about it, writes about it. There are people who have gone from insulator to insurance business to lead it. So, and that is our moment of Pepsi to Apple. So I think as an entrepreneur, Mr. Birla's and his paradigm that leadership is fungible. You need to be willing to learn, and you must not have ego to not learn or ask people, etc. are good criteria on which you can make selections. And that is how, actually, he had offered me Carbon Black to lead 3 years prior to I took it over. And that time I told him, I don't think, Mr. Birla, I'm ready yet. I will hesitate. And actually, I was hesitant. On another occasion, he had asked me to take on the responsibility of financial services. I said, I don't relate to the business. Today, I'll end up being on the board of AB Capital is a very different thing. But I said, I don't relate to the business, So I think he was willing to experiment and take. Actually, in that process, he was taking a bigger risk than I was taking, I always could have come back to HR and done something, whatever. But he had warned me to say that I will find myself at the deep end of the pool, I quote unquote, particularly from accounting and finance point of view. So I adopted a CFO of group, very veteran, etc., who I told him, you are my mentor on finance, accounts and all of that. And a few years later, he said, Dr. Misra, you have become dangerously knowledgeable on finance accounts. So, I thought that was the ultimate compliment to receive from your guru when he says that. And then I had requested Mr. Birla that, if I'm going to take over Carbon Black business, I have one request. He said, what? I said, then announce it 6 months ahead of time. He said, why? I said, then I don't have to hide and learn about it. I can openly say, here is a role I have to go into, so I have to learn. So I don't have to hide and pretend as if I'm a man of great curiosity trying to learn Carbon Black for no good reason. I can be more honest to say I'm going to do that job and I better learn it. And those 6 months I visited potential customers through my network of relationships, and God bless all of them, because I have a lot of friends who can always reach out and help. And the CEO of a global MNC who opened his factory to see me, tire manufacturing. I spoke to a competitor's gentleman who left them. He was based in Boston. I remember, 4 or 5 hours on telephone. I spoke with him in different trances to learn about global carbon black market and industry. There are several colleagues who worked in carbon black within the group, but had gone to other businesses or had retired. So I reached out all of them to learn from them. And you tell me whatever you think I should know about the business, kind of very broad and open question. So I prepared for it, and that is how. And I've been a bit of a kind of self-appointed dreamer about certain things, and people never believe in that. I know perhaps people laugh about it, when I say 2009 or so, we became named as Best Employer of India by one of Hewitt's surveys. And 2004, in our HR vision and strategy, I had written there with my colleagues saying, we must be Best Employer of India by 2010. We achieved it 1 year earlier. When I took Carbon Black, I had told my colleagues, and I'm pretty sure in washroom they must have gone and laughed. I said, look, we must try to be the world's #1 carbon black company. There's no reason why we cannot be. And we got to just figure out how to do it. And exactly in 2 years, 6 months, we became world's largest carbon black company by acquiring the world #3. We were world #4. And today, I think we are doing a lot of path-breaking work, which even our competitors are noticing about what we are doing. And I'm very proud of the team and what they have done. But that's where the important thing is that a lot of the HR on teams, dynamics, M&A integration, retaining people at key roles, spotting talent to give them opportunity. So a lot of this came very handy to me to make those kind of contribution to the business while leave the experts to do what they know best. But I always brought in that ability to connect dots and the social science background that I told about asking questions, that what's the connectivity between this and that. I think asking the right questions is very important than having the right answers. I've learned that in doing this role.
Remarkable. So if at one end organization was willing to take the risk, you obviously made the best of those opportunities for sure. So much to learn there. I missed, actually, there were 2 hands raised earlier. Akhil, I thought you had raised a hand earlier. Okay. Then I saw Mr. Satish Pradhan raising his hand. You wanted to say something?
Yeah, one quick one, Santrupt. I know I'm hogging privileged time, which I should allow others to, but I cannot resist this. There are 2 parts of what you said which have always fascinated me. One is the exercise of judgment, and you call it, making a pattern, recognizing patterns, and then going with your gut. Data analytics being secondary, if at all significant. And I think it's that judgment, evolving judgment from the reverse role, where it played out in a role-relevant, level-relevant manner, which I've seen. And today, as a global CEO, it is again level-relevant and global, space relevant, time relevant, that I see this judgment playing out. The second part of it is not just the judgment of what to do, what not to do. It is the part about what you just casually mentioned, navigating past, making it a success with deeply held philosophical beliefs like respecting differences, respecting cultural context, respecting the deities that others worship in an organizational sense. And not in a manipulative way, in a real being that kind of. Is that something that you can help us think about how to do that earlier rather than later for other people?
Well, I'm increasingly becoming a believer, Satish, about the impact of exposure an individual has on broadening that mind and that reflective capacity. And I think to my team, in HR team, in talent development, I always say that one of the magic formula we to figure out how do we build the reflective quotient in our managers, irrespective of the level. How can they think 2 levels higher on a broader plane rather than making everything narrow on every subject? So I think there's no magic bullet for it, excepting that I believe if you are exposed to multiple situations in life, personal life and your student life and your professional life, I think the Tata Institute early years, when I did a lot of training consulting for almost 40 companies, I think that broadened also my horizon, dynamics, the value drivers of different businesses, etc. I remember I designed the very first strategic management program for Hindustan Petroleum way back in 1987, where I talked about what is likely to happen to the oil industry. How could alternate fuel could come? And today, when I look back on some of my very old fading slides, you had fading slides written in those marker pens in those days. I get shocked that, I was talking about things that kind of are real before us today. So I think it is all about exposure. And I got to thank Vidya Valan for entertainment to say that exposure it is. So,
Sure. So, Dr. Misra, I think while it's about you, but I think when we have you here, we will be missing out if we don't ask you about, for HR folks. You have seen HR from the days of, personal admin, IR, administrative support, to a little more business partnering and then now transformative kind of role, and now as a business leader. And then now digitization push for the last 1.5 years. So HR people of today, in terms of their capabilities and the mindset for today and going forward, what are your thoughts at this point?
Well, I think that's a very broad question, Pramod. I think, I hate to be very prescriptive, but all I would say is that, HR can be as exciting, as value-adding, as impactful a profession as anybody wants to make it to be. Mm-hmm. And that cannot be done, and particularly HR job, I believe, cannot be done simply if you are focused on I, me, and myself. You need to have that larger spirit of accountability and a sense of moral responsibility, saying, I have a moral responsibility. A business of mine recently made arrangement with another company to transfer several people as a part of some processes to that company. And I noticed that there was a mail from some employee saying, well, our retirement is 60 and this place where they are sending us in name of business process outsourcing is 58. And we're going to lose out. So I called my colleague here and I told him, I said, look, this is grossly unfair. You're treating employees like slaves. You got to go and get the CHRO and we got to have a meeting. We got to fix this problem. No, but that company receiving as 58. I said, that's none of my problem. They are my employees. You sending them is not their voluntary choice. So you got to find an answer to that. You cannot force them into a situation that is unacceptable and is not the contract we had. Now, this I consider as a moral responsibility. If I simply go calculation of cost saving, this, that, and efficiency logic, then I will quietly accept this phenomenon. And I may have a battle with my business leader of the business who is trying to do this by taking this stance. But I believe that HR job is about taking a position on a subject where you think a matter of principle is involved. It is not moral judgment, but it is about saying there is a contract, there is a respect that if you blatantly treat people, then you are not respecting them, So I think my only appeal to people would be sometimes we believe that too much of pleasing your boss, pleasing boss's boss, or somehow trying to look good, appear to be conflict avoidant, and a very nice guy who will kind of manage something and somehow artificially patchwork fixing things. A lot of people take that route as mantras of success. Well, it can take to some degree of success materially in the short term, few jobs here and there, designations, doesn't matter. But if you want to look back in your career reflectively at the end of it, when you become only answerable to yourself at the end of the day you look back saying, were there critical moments that I could have stood up and did the right thing and I did not? And I think there the mirror is unforgiving about you. I think that's the message I want to leave with everybody, that don't push yourself to be a situation where you will be uncomfortable looking into the mirror yourself, and you must feel proud that you did the right things whenever an opportunity presented to yourself. So, I'll give an example. We were discussing something on business yesterday, an issue I can't go into details, but, 875 million versus 1 billion and $950 million. And there was some email happening. So I wrote to them this morning. I said, look, do you want to be precisely right and directionally wrong? Or do you want to be directionally right and precisely, wrong? Which one you want to follow, And I think one of the things HR could play a big role is to provide perspectives and frameworks to line colleagues and others to think about a problem differently. A young colleague day before said to me, Dr. Misra, our counseling process, last 3-5 years, I think, number of employees reaching out during even pandemic has hovered between 280 to 350, etc. I said, you and I should be delighted that despite a pandemic, our people are emotionally stable. They are not needing more counseling. Why should I see this as a negative phenomenon? It's a positive thing. That there is a standard pattern of how many people are seeking external help. It hasn't gone up exponentially during pandemic. I said, would you feel delighted if thousands of my people or thousands of them went to a counselor because they are emotionally not able to deal with their issues? I think I would look at the data very differently. So I think this kind of conversation and taking time out to build perspective is HR has a tremendous opportunity by virtue of their role. It could be about the values of the company, decision-making, empowerment. People have lack of conceptual clarity on a lot of things, and HR has a role to help them to think about it. What is empowerment? People loosely use those expressions. So I think HR has a lot of opportunity to add value.
Yes, Akhil.
Pramod, if I can add to what Santrupt is mentioning and our own learning from him. Throughout the period of decades, I've seen one thing common. His own conviction about what he believes in and ability to speak up. Sometimes very contrary to what others feel around. But I don't think I've seen Santrupt flinch away from saying what is on his mind. The good part is today when he mentioned about his early upbringing amongst intellectuals and authors and people of academic, that respect is the word he used several times today.
Sure.
So big learning is that, you can be respectfully disagreeable and you can have your own conviction. So when Santrupt left Hindustan Lever and went to Birla Group, I'll be very candid here, all of us were surprised. And Santrupt, if you remember, we mentioned that this is amazing. You leave one of the best multinational employer and go and work for an Indian company those days. 95, 96 or so? Around that
96.
Yeah. But he was clear. He was clear that I'm doing the right thing. Done his own homework and his own conviction. Not to learn when I look at Santrupt, if there's one thing to learn from him, is your conviction, speak up. And I think that trait is something that is HRT, or in his ending comments was just now recently mentioning that if people need not be that popular and try to be nice guy and diplomatic, etc. I mean, you can be diplomatic, but not necessarily agreeable. So that lesson has to be learned by a lot of young HR people. The path would be very different from what.
Sure. Thanks very much. Those are very relevant comments. Absolutely
Thank you,
on point. So actually, Dr. Misra, this was in a way my last question as well. You have kind of already answered, but and also we are almost running out of time. But if you have 3-4 minutes, I once again want to ask this.
Sure.
Your conviction, your professional boldness comes through at the same time the respect for divergent perspectives and views, etc. But in corporate career, you go through situations where sometimes certain things need to be done because they need to be done as a part of ecosystem, stakeholder, etc. So what has been your way of handling those situations?
See, I am not an activist.
Okay.
But I make a note of issues that I have encountered that need to be fixed. That particular point in time may not be the right time to try and fix it. But that doesn't mean that you ignore that as an agenda item. You need to make a note of it and come back to it. And there are many examples. I don't have time. I can give it. But there are many examples where there are agenda that I could not fix, but I have been able to come back to fix it in the system after 6 months, sometimes 1 year. There have been occasions when I have taken ideas and thoughts to Mr. Birla where he has said, no, Dr. Misra, we shouldn't be doing this at this moment. Okay. I worked hard on this, feel disappointed at that moment in time. And at the end of the day, you still are a human being. 6-7 months later, he has asked me, you remember you brought me a note 7 months ago on this subject. I think the time has come now. We should act on it. Now, that's phenomenal, which means you didn't achieve anything on that day, but you achieved the fact that you planted a thought, a seed about certain agenda that can be pursued. And I think that's great success and achievement. So a lot of the time we believe that achievement is here and now. You just go in, walk in, and that happens next day, but not really. That's instant coffee approach to, managing change or transformation. Being able to say that, all right, I will wait my time to make this change. I think that is you will get criticized in the process,
Sure.
I read a beautiful line, something, my Hindi is not all that good, but it said something like this, that मेरे खिलाफ बहुत सारे बातें मैं खामोशी के साथ सुनता हूं. मेरे खिलाफ बहुत सारे बातें मैं खामोशी के साथ सुनता हूं, लेकिन जवाब देने का हक मैं सिर्फ वक्त को दे रखा है. So I've given the right to time to reply to all the criticisms I hear against myself. I think a transformative agent or leader needs to retain that approach with that conviction that time will prove whether what you did was right or not right. So you don't have to respond to everything that happens around you. So what you said is, in business, sometimes, yes, you reach there, but you do not ignore the agenda. You make a note of it, saying, okay, I'll wait for my time to make a fix or change on this particular aspect.
This is absolutely inspiring and remarkable. Mr. Satish, you wanted to say something, right? I saw your hand raised. You want to say something?
I was actually applauding.
Okay.
Thank you,
so I wish I had some way. I had some way of, where everybody could unmute and applaud. I mean, it's been such an engrossing, insightful, and an amazing conversation. I just read a comment by Mr. Pradhan that this is a good way to build perspective, have one-on-one conversation. And this was my belief, that if we get people to talk to HR professionals or professionals in general, how they have dealt with various kinds of situations, hearing it from them, I think there is a tremendous value. And I have to say that that belief seems to be coming true with the 2 meetings that I have had. Dr. Misra, I can't thank you enough. Is there anything else you would want to say?
Nothing. I just want to thank you for having me and thank all my family, friends, as I described there, for being today and giving me the inspiration and courage to share the story. Thank you so much. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And to each one of you who joined and contributed to this conversation, please be assured that we will be continuing this series. We may not be able to get Dr. Santrupt Misra every time, but of course, another Santrupt Misra every time, but we'll try and see that we bring people along who have made their mark and who have come up with distinction. Dr. Santrupt Misra, thank you very much on behalf of each one of them who joined, and we hope to continue to leverage.
Very interesting, Santrupt. Very interesting session.
Thanks, Akhil. Thank you so much.
As authentic as one can expect from you. Very authentic.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
And we have people like Dr. Timra joining and, to encourage all of us. So thank you very much, everybody. Professor Timra, you want to say something? You were, Dr. Santrupt Misra is one of the earliest HR heads you worked with. I saw your 360-degree comments of the time when it used to be just heard about. When people are beginning to know what is 360-degree, and you had an intervention. You want to talk about it?
No, I think Santrupt has been very, very inspiring. Absolutely. I think I still remember your post-Eisenhower fellowship, Santrupt. A wonderful talk you went. I think I attended more than a couple of your sessions. I still remember. And I think your same energy and agility, inspiring, I think lovely. And I don't agree with your first comment. I think anyone aspiring to be, to have you as a role model is not limiting. I think it's very difficult to come to that level. But if you consider it as limiting, I don't know what else can be aspired. It's a very inspiring talk. Wonderful.
Thanks so much.
Nice.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much, Dr. Santrupt Misra. And in future as well, we will look forward to learning from your experience and expertise. And thank you very much, everybody. And take good care of yourself. And we hope to see most of you in the next session, which you will hear about in the next week or so. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.